When you think about Colorado, you think about Rocky Mountain High. You think about people being high. You think about being high in the altitude, high with your attitudes. But unfortunately for Rockies fans, not high in the standings. It's a rough couple of years for the Colorado Rockies. Is there hope on the horizon? Well, there's hope for this show. It means Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies, not Rocked On Lockies. Holy cow. Do you what? Heck with it. Let's start the show.
You are Locked On MLB, your daily MLB podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, baseball fans. Welcome to Locked On MLB, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. This is the daily podcast. We talk about all of Major League Baseball. I am your host, Paul Francis Sullivan. You don't believe me? Look at my lower third right there. You can call me Sully. I am an Emmy-nominated television producer who has been a baseball podcaster for well over a decade now and has finished 4 seasons here with the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team every day. I'm going to say it as often as I can. You can please tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On MLB. You can follow us on Twitter. Remember Twitter? You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On MLB Pods. Same handle for Instagram. I'm your pal Sully. I'm at Sully Baseball on Twitter, Sully Baseball Podcast on Instagram, and I have not figured out Mastodon. And I've barely figured out this podcast, as you tell. That was actually my second attempt to start the show, and I said, do you know what? Just start it, Sully. Just start it. If you stub your toe, just start it. And it's almost appropriate that we're talking about a last place team today. I'm going to try to do something on each one of the teams before the season begins. And, well, the middle of December is just as good a time as any to talk about the Colorado Rockies. And I'm Paul Francis Sullivan, but we need another Paul Francis in here. So let's bring in Paul Francis Holden.
Woo!
Of Locked On Rockies, not Locked On Rockies or Rocked On Lockies or whatever the hell I was saying. Well, that was take 2.
Mm-hmm.
That was take 2. I was going to be one of the great Stanley Kubrick films took place in Colorado called The Shining. I was about to pull a Kubrick and do like take 5, take 6, take 400. I said, nah, the heck with it. Paul Holden, he's got a life. So how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. I have gone from a wonderful baseball season into just a football fandom season that's gone on great. Everything is perfect with the Denver Broncos right now, just like everything is perfect with the Colorado Rockies.
Just giving you an idea of my lack of knowledge of football. Are the Broncos good this year? I don't know.
No, they're terrible.
Okay.
They did a huge. Tell me if you heard this before, Sully. They made a big trade, and it hasn't panned out. I wonder if that sounds familiar to maybe a certain team we're talking about. But Sully, when it comes to this offseason with the Rockies, at least there's a lot of stuff that I am frustrated about and have questions about. But at least this season, there's at least some form of an identity that we kind of know. And the Rockies have a ton of really interesting and exciting prospects up on the horizon. But now it's a question of, are the Rockies going to go all in and trust these prospects to start with those guys? Or are they actually going to retool and build with this outfield? And here's Sully. I want you to just close your eyes and just picture this. Aaron Judge gets announced to be the right fielder for the Colorado Rockies. How many home runs is he hitting?
None, because that's not going to happen. But what, you are in Colorado, and whatever you're smoking right now is obviously working. No, I see. And here's let me counteract that for a second. You're always going to get players who could produce offensively in Colorado. That's almost like you're spending money. You're spending money to buy entertainment while at Disneyland.
Mm-hmm.
You're already going to get offensive players. What you need to do is get the pitching staff to keep the runs below 4. And, Judge in Colorado would be great. I hear the schools are great. Mike Hampton couldn't shut up about him. But by the way, as I was saying, I don't know enough about the Broncos to make any contribution. But trust Tim Tebow. I think they're gonna do well. I've not been following for a few years. I assume he's still the quarterback
Yeah,
of the
you know,
Denver
he's
Broncos.
he's definitely still involved. Russell Wilson, the new quarterback there. But you're right, Sully. They need to beef up the pitching, but you talk about offense, and this is a Rockies team that is underperformed in terms of offense. CJ Crone didn't the most home runs for the Rockies, and he had like 29 or 30 for the Rockies, and he was the team leader in home
Yeah,
runs. Not a lot of double digit home run hitters. The Rockies were among at the bottom of the league for a long time of the season and leaving the yard. And in today's game of baseball, that's a huge part of generating offense.
that's
And
true.
they just have not been. No one was really when Chris Bryant, the limited time we did see, the Rockies actually did have a good offense. The Rockies started a pretty classic thing. The season starts, the Rockies start pretty well. They beat the Dodgers in the first series. Chris Bryant's looking good, batting like 300 throughout the first good stretch of the season. And then it all falls apart. And then when you're looking at it, before the Rockies start going in and going to some of the prospects, you're kind of sitting there and you're like, CJ Crone can't be the only big bat in this lineup. He can't be the only power option the Rockies have because you're turning to Ryan McMahon, who isn't necessarily going to leave the yard all the time. Brendan Rodgers started the season historically bad and then turned into being what I think the Rockies' best overall player last year. But he's not necessarily counted on for power as much as just driving the ball and being a solid overall hitter. Randall Grichuk hit the ball on the ground as much as Raimel Tapia did when they made the trade for Raimel Tapia. And Grichuk was supposed to be the guy that was going to strike out 150 times, but he was at least going to leave the yard. That was kind of the whole idea.
Yeah.
So the Rockies' offense is also in desperate need of a jump start. But you mentioned the pitching. Every single one of the Rockies pitchers last year, the starters, regressed. They other than maybe Chad Kuhl, who came in and then had a good start and then was kind of wishy-washy for the rest. It was a season to forget for Herman Marquez and
Yep.
Kyle Freeland as well. Kyle Freeland, I do a little grain of salt for last season because he was incredibly unlucky and was the victim of his team. The Rockies can't hit on the road right now. They can't win on the road, but it's compounded by the fact that they can't. It felt like if a team scored 2 runs against the Rockies and the Rockies were on the road, that was enough. That this team was just simply did not have the capabilities because as soon as they left Coors Field, any form of offense wasn't enough. And they even were losing the shootout games at Coors Field, where the Rockies usually thrive. And hey, if 7 runs are scored by the first 4 innings, you kind of have a feeling the Rockies are going to be the one that are going to outlast and win it. And that wasn't the case this year. So I think, yes, the pitching staff is an absolute must fix. The Rockies actually have been kind of aggressive with a series of minor moves, nothing too big, but it is encouraging to see the Rockies actually being active already in the offseason. Again, not anything groundbreaking, not blockbusters, but they do make the first trade of the offseason. I believe they've added 3 new pitchers to the staff. They bring back Jose Arena, who wasn't bad, and in reality, like, he's not great either. He's a 4th or 5th starter, and that's what he's going to be and what the Rockies need him to be. But nothing anything flashy, but at least there's activity. Whereas in seasons past, we've been sitting here wondering if the Rockies will make a single move.
What is you now? Let's just wrap up 2022 in a little bit of a bow before we start thinking about their strategies moving forward. This obviously was a big. This was a lost year. There's no way to put a bow on this other than to just say it was a lost year with the pitching staff. I mean, listen to even what you were saying. Well, our offense was bad and our pitching was historically terrible. You know. Besides that, Mrs. Lincoln, how'd you like to play? Uh, it's a 94. It's amazing. The thing you could say is they're a 94 loss team,
Mhm.
not a 100 loss team. Um, but Bud Black is still there, and he's still a really good baseball mind. And I think it's actually one of the things that will be best for this team is to have a little bit of stability there uh, at the uh, um, at the helm.
Mhm.
But what was it? Let's just be positive for a second. I mean, from my point of view, I'm stunned that they didn't trade Daniel Bard at the trade deadline because a closer with a sub 2 ERA and Coors, who's at the wrong end of 35, might be a valuable trade chip. But maybe they just felt, well, let's what do we gain by trading Daniel Bard? I mean, what great, why don't you just continue to just do your best with him? And you're not going to get a blue chipper, you're not going to get an all-time, a real difference maker for Bard. So maybe it does make sense to keep him around. But what was your biggest highlight of the year and the best feel good moment? Was it the start or was it something else?
There's a bunch of small things we're encouraging about the Rockies. And you mentioned it right there. Daniel Bard has completely rewritten his legacy. He can now take away any sort of negative feeling or emotion that he had for when he had to step away from the game. And he's asserted himself. He was one of the best closers in baseball. At least you can look at the numbers and everything. Daniel Bard was a top 5 closer in Major League Baseball last year. He was right up there with some statistical categories with Edwin Diaz. He doesn't run out to trumpets or, and not in a 100-win Mets team, but Daniel Bard was a huge part of the Rockies when, again, those close games, it was nice to know that the Rockies had someone who could come out of the bullpen and keep them in those close games. I mentioned Brendan Rodgers a little bit as well. He started the season awful. I mean, he's the one of the big prospects too, former one of the basically one of the people the Rockies are looking to for the future. He starts off awful, like sub 100 batting average over the first month of the season, and this is your everyday second baseman for the Rockies. And he turns it around completely and becomes one of the Rockies, probably the best overall player with the Rockies last year. He's a Gold Glove winner at second base, consistent offensive performance, and turns it. I love when a player can completely turn something around, and the trends are the start of the season was meant, but by the end of the season, he's in the groove, and see what happens as the full season kind of gets there. And I think Brendan Rodgers is going to be a player that really, really benefits from a normal off season, no COVID, no lockout. He knows what worked and what didn't work last year. He's going to be a really great player. And two other things too. I really am excited. The Rockies said they threw in the towel, even though they didn't trade anybody. One of the big disappointments, again, for now back-to-back seasons is the Rockies' inactivity at the trade deadline. Really doesn't make sense that CJ Cron and Daniel Bard stayed on the team last year, just because teams would have loved CJ Cron at that point. Before CJ Cron fell off after the All-Star game, there wouldn't be what team wouldn't want a power slugging first baseman for their playoff push where you could have beefed up your bullpen. The Rockies don't have a single left-handed pitcher in their bullpen. They could have done a lot of stuff there, but they did to say we're getting our top prospects playing time. From the Nolan Arenado trade, you did see this year, you saw Eleris Montero and Ezekiel Tovar, the two big prospects who came over in that trade. Tovar most likely is going to be the Rockies starting shortstop next year after Jose Iglesias. I mean, he had nothing. Jose Iglesias was a sneaky good sign for the Rockies last year. That could be another storyline you look at, but he's going to go help a team that can compete. And the Rockies got to see great things from some of their prospects: Michael Tolia, Sean Bouchard, Tovar, and Montero. That something the Rockies haven't done is give their prospects playing time, and those four got consistent playing time at the end of the year. And then Sully, I don't know if folks might not have caught this if they weren't there. The Rockies did give a long-time AAA member, Wynton Bernard, finally 10 years in the minor leagues. He got his shot at the major league level for a bit. He might not be with the Rockies anymore, but he's still someone that can go bring value to a team. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if Wynton Bernard maybe gets a cup of coffee with someone, or is at least with another organization. If you didn't see that story, it was really cool. That's the nice part of baseball, when the Rockies said, let's go, you get up here. And he actually performed all right. He didn't hit that all that good, but was fine. And that was something where it brought a real nice breath of fresh air into the season that desperately needed it, because above all, looming over everything is that Chris Bryant trade.
Right.
Or
Well,
signing, I should say, not trade. Trade is
the
still burned in my brain.
the Wynton Bernard moment was really that we did a whole episode on that and why that just is everything great about baseball. And it's just a surefire bet that the Rockies will improve, at least improve their mindset when they start bringing some of these young players up and giving them the playing time they need. And if you're going to make any bets, you go to Bet Online. Bet Online remains your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to the World Cup and esports, we've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, and I'm guessing you do, you'll find those at Bet Online as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. Bet online. That's where the game starts. Yeah, the Wynton Bernard call up was, if that was out of the rookie. That was just, it was
Right.
so heartwarming. And I think that baseball has to find more moments like that. I've said before, and I talked about it on that show, that when I was a guest on a show once, and I'm repeating myself, those who remember that show, but it's worth repeating. I was a guest on a show called Baseball PhD, which is a great podcast. I'm going to plug them. I'm on their show a lot, and Ed Kasputis, who's the wonderful host that has me on about once a month. Anyway, um, he asked me, "What would you do? What would you say to someone who wants to start following baseball? How would you get them into the game?" And I think he was expecting me to say something about, this kind of great play or that kind of great play. And I said, find the story that you emotionally cling to. It's the reason why when we watch the Olympics or you watch the British baking show or whatever it is, you can get emotionally attached to someone and start cheering for them. You get emotionally attached to a team and start cheering for that team. That brings more eyeballs and more emotion than any sabermetric statistic, win, loss, or whatever. And if you can attach yourself emotionally to a club, like the Wynton Bernard story, there are probably tons of Wynton Bernard stories. We stubbed our toe on that one. It took a teammate to do a freaking iPhone video of it and posting it on Instagram for us to see that story. Baseball has to find those stories, and that's the thing that will build up the fan base. I personally believe.
No, I think that's a great point, and it's not just marketing the players. It's baseball is so hard. I don't think. I mean, I think people get it, but some people still, when that aren't baseball fans, when they I still think they think I'm kind of a homer when I'm like, the hardest thing to do in sports is hit it 95 to 100 mile an hour fastball.
Mhm.
You just don't understand how hard it is. And then it's not like football. You go to college, and if you played a good enough college, you got a good shot in the draft. And if you're drafted high enough, you're in the league. You're playing, and it might not last long, but you made it to the league. Same with basketball, has some development leagues, and so do hockey. But there's nothing like going through the grind of the minor leagues. If you're a Wynton Bernard, Wynton Bernard has been not only trying to be a professional baseball player, but also running a whole full other life because of the life that minor league long lifers in the minor leagues have to live due to pay and all that stuff. He's worked his whole life around it, and it all paid off for him for 5 days. It was
Yeah.
5 days, but for him for 5 days. Wynton Bernard was the talk of the Colorado Rockies. And yes, I mean, for a lot of people, that's who cares? It's the Rockies. They're irrelevant. It was a week in July or whenever it was. But for us, I mean, for fans, I mean, the broadcast, the fans, the signs, I mean, that matter. Like you said, that's where the magic of baseball is, because it takes those storylines to keep you engaged throughout the season. Why do Rockies fans care about Rockies baseball when they're 30 games out from the division lead in July? Well, it's because Wynton Bernard just came up. It might not be that big of a deal, but it's awesome. That was, I mean, there's so much awesome things to kind of celebrate about the game that we don't often get a chance to do. And I think part of and I think what might hopefully help a little bit is this new balanced schedule, Sully. I can't tell you how excited I am for playing the Dodgers and Giants considerably less as a Rockies fan. But I think that when we're talking about growing the game, I think this is the way to do it. Let fans see all of these players and experience these storylines. It's going to be nice for people to actually see, wait, who's on the Rockies now that Nolan Arenado isn't there? Like, they can finally learn maybe these prospects with the good stories, or just fall in love with the new team. I got a guy from Minnesota who just decided to start watching the Rockies last year because he follows the show, and just because he was liked one of the players, and now he's in. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, and you're also seeing there are reasons to follow a team beyond geographical reasons. Like, you see, there's sometimes when you have little leagues where they'll first of all, Major League Baseball should give little league uniforms. They should not be licensed. Little league shouldn't have to pay. Major League Baseball should be showing up with these uniforms and hats and furnishing every young kid with that,
Mhm.
because when you have the kid putting on, like when my kids played little league, and one year they had licensed the Major League Baseball uniforms, so they were wearing Mets uniforms, and the kids walking around wearing the Mets and the Cardinals and the Dodgers and the A's and all these other teams, and they looked great. And when my kids saw the Mets on the TV, said, "Oh, he looks like me." Fabulous. The next year, they didn't pay for the licensing, and it just said, the Pasadena Little League on it. And I go, where are the uniforms? Oh, they priced this out. I said, you could not possibly be stupider than
Mhm.
to price out little leaguers. I mean, this is not an opinion. This is a fact. That's them saying, we don't want young fans. We
Yep.
don't. If you put on the Little League uniform, so, wow, I look like a ball player. You turn on the TV. No, I look like a ball player. They should be showing up with trucks of these and handing them out for free, because you get a young generation walking around in their uniforms.
Mhm.
You get that attachment to it. But one thing that also, I think baseball, more than any other sport, you do get attached to the players on that team because it's a day in and day out. You do get to know them. You do get to feel with them, which is one of the reasons why you have these teams that have constant revolving doors. It's sometimes harder to root for a team like that because
Absolutely.
you don't understand that element of, these are our friends for the summer.
Mhm.
We're going to spend the summer with this group. And yes, you're expecting a little bit of turnover here or there, but there's a core that you're always expected, maybe not year in and year out, but these are our friends for the year. My favorite baseball movie of all time, and I did a whole podcast on this, is Bull Durham. And one of the things I think Bull Durham did brilliantly is that it showed that, but first of all, that baseball is a job, and baseball is, Susan Sarandon's character romanticizes it, but you also see it's a grind, it's a job, but it's also is not about winning a title. If baseball fandom, like in that movie, the Bulls don't win the championship. In fact, the final game of most sports movies end with a championship game. Bull Durham ended with a rainout. The last game of Bull Durham's a rainout.
Mhm.
And but you got to know the character, you got to know the team. Most fan bases don't experience a World Series at the end of the year. So why would you follow a team year in, year out? Why would you follow a team for 162 games, for more than, for a gigantic chunk of the year? Because you attach yourself emotionally to them. And you think about what Wynton Bernard meant, that emotional grabbing that you can have there. That's where the pull of the team is. That's where the pull of this game is. It's there for you all summer. It's there if you need it. You don't expect anyone to watch all 162 games, but it's a lot of times it's Wednesday. I'm in a mood. I just need a game on. I just need a
Mhm.
game on, and those are your friends who are there. And baseball has to understand. They have to understand it's not always going to be about flashy stars. Or everything. It's about, hey, here's your friends for the summer. Get to know them, and if they win, great. But if they don't win, you got a friend for the summer.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of Rockies fans have embodied that, and then we were kind of getting treated that the friends that we've gotten to know were building up into a team, and then they decided to they moved out of the neighborhood. I mean, they didn't move the team, but they moved on. They moved
Yeah.
to a different school district, so you didn't get your friends coming to the summer anymore, and now. Hopefully, this new crop of players is going to give Rockies fans, because that is the thing that's tough. I think the pool of Rockies fans, real deal, die hard, can tell you tell you the starting nine is at one of its lowest points. I don't necessarily think the Rockies have given you a ton to cheer for over the past couple of seasons after being at what I would argue one of the highest points. I mean, the back-to-back playoff years and the what if and the possibilities of what 2019, and then obviously the world kind of turned over, not only the Rockies world but the whole world as well. Things changed there, but the possibilities of what could have happened in 2019 if that team didn't collapse in the second half of the season. That's where those were the stories, and then now it's Chris Bryant, it's these prospects. The Rockies have to, I think, reestablish a lot of that connection with their fans, because I don't think a ton of people like me that want to spend, if I wasn't even the host, I'd still catch 150 games. But I got to say, I am the rarest of the rare of Rockies fans. They're out there, but I think more people would just be more interested in doing other stuff in the summer or just other teams that are out there. I mean, it's evident by the fact that the Rockies hardly ever really feel like they play a true home game, especially when they're in the division. I mean, if the Dodgers are in town, if the Giants are in town, or the Padres are in town, it's almost, I mean, it's definitely Dodger Stadium West or East, when LA's in town. So
Yeah.
it is a matter of the sometimes it's not, doesn't feel like you can develop that relationship with the way the front office and the people that run the team view the team as well, because the business side is crushing it for them. So not, not don't need to rock the boat too much. I think if in terms of them, but we'll see. I think Chris Bryant coming back can be the first step that'll help get some fans reinterested in the team. But if these prospects are all great, then you got a whole new look Rockies team that you can kind of introduce and be like, this is the new 2023 Colorado Rockies that have a new look to them.
All right, we're here with Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies. Let's talk about Veen. Let's talk about Tovar. Let's talk about Amador. Talk about some of the prospects that are coming up through the pipeline. This is a team that they need a centerpiece bat to be their identity. And part of me thinks, especially a team like the Rockies, can be one of those teams that waits around for spring training when there's a glut of outfielder free agents and hitter free agents, that they could say, hey, why don't you sign with the Rockies, pad your stats a little bit, live in Denver for a year, and and reignite your career. JD Martinez being in, putting him in the middle of Coors Field as he's a free agent, or maybe a Yuli Gurriel, someone like that. You don't sign those guys to a long-term deal, but maybe you say, hey, reclaim your throne. Obviously, pitchers are more reluctant to do that. But you have Veen, you have Tovar. Talk to us about some of the young players that you are most excited about calling Coors their home.
I'm really excited to see what we can see from Ezequiel Tovar. He is the prospect to watch for the Rockies. We've gotten a good glimpse of what Montero can be. Eloise Montero, third base, first baseman, going to probably play first base a little bit. Those two are going to be the ones to watch, not only how they got there, but they got some really interesting. Montero's got some great power potential and was really barreling up some nice home runs at the end of the season when he was playing pretty consistently for the Rockies. But Tovar, like I said, if he's the starting shortstop, that's going to be pretty awesome to watch for the Rockies. It's going to be a young guy getting what is a historically very important position for the Colorado Rockies. I mean, it's Tulo, it's Story, and Iglesias filled in. Iglesias has a long history too and was there, and now it's going to be Tovar. The Rockies look to be Tovar as the next shortstop and this next high level player, this high profile player of that Tulo caliber. A name you might not have heard of is Sean Bouchard. He is an outfielder prospect for the Rockies who had a really good appearance at the plate and was sneaky good for the Rockies. Michael Toglia is up with the team. The Rockies have gotten Todd Helton reinvested and reworking with this club, specifically with that prospect. They believe Michael Toglia is the next Todd Helton, and for Rockies fans, that's about as high of praise you can give outside of calling an outfielder the next Larry Walker. But by the way, Todd Helton for Hall of Fame, I think it's a no-doubter. We can do that podcast another day. But those are the ones to watch. And then Veen, I think Veen isn't going to start the season with the Rockies. I think he'll play in the spring. I think Veen will come later in the year. And if the Rockies are struggling and Veen continues to shred, he will be with the Rockies sooner rather than later. But Sully, you were mentioning
Veen is really young, though, right?
Yes, he's very young.
He's just right out of high school.
Yeah, he's. I think he's played like 2-3 seasons maybe in the minors. I don't think any more than that. And yeah, like you said, he's young, and the Rockies have outfielders at the moment, so they don't need to bring Veen up right away, especially when they're using the outfield to get playing time for Sean Bouchard and Michael Toglia, two prospects you're already trying to figure out where to fit them into the equation. So you mentioned about bringing in a good bat for the outfield. I really think the piece of the puzzle that makes the most sense for the Rockies is to go after Cody Bellinger. I think the Rockies bring Cody Bellinger in for a year. That frees you up to go, and you can say, hey, guess what, teams? We can trade you a Jonathan Daza and a CJ Cron because you can have Montero play your first base. And teams, I've been saying this a lot on a couple of my crossovers, thinking about that, go down to Miami, hey, say Miami, you want an outfielder and a first baseman that are pretty good on offense. Get us a couple of pitchers there. Get a couple of left-handed pitchers there. I think that's how you kind of clear some space up.
Okay, and then this is, of course, always going to be the question for the Rocks. Any pitchers coming up that
No,
may be okay? Well,
yeah,
okay.
I think that there's really nothing in terms of pitching prospects to sit there and say, yes, this is it. There's really, to my knowledge, there might be at the lower levels, but no one coming up. All of the relief bullpen options the Rockies looked at last year, they have been giving some people in their system shots. Haven't really panned out. Tyler Kinley is a former he has dealt with some injuries this year and is going to be sidelined for a good chunk of the year, but is someone to also watch. But I can't sit there and say there's any exciting pitching prospects for the Rockies.
Well, it's always an exciting prospect to know that when we want to talk Rocks, all I got to do is say, Paul Holden, what time and when.
Absolutely, Sully. Appreciate it as always. Thank you so much for having me on the show. If people want to stay up to date with the Rocks, they can find us Locked On Rockies, LO Rockies on Twitter. I'm at Paul Holden 33, and we're on YouTube as well. So come hang out. Where Rockies got a lot of fun stuff, and we have a fun time on the pod as well.
Well, thanks for making Locked On MLB your first listen for today. For the second listen, obviously have it be Locked On Rockies. But for the third lesson, check in on Locked On Sports Today, from the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports. Go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insight only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, it's available on this app. It's available on the YouTubes or wherever you get your podcasts. Talking Colorado Rockies and understanding what really drives us to a team. It's not always winning championships. Otherwise, what the hell would Paul Holden be doing